Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We will begin today's Gospel of Holy Mother's class. As usual, every alternate Saturday we have the Gospel of Holy Mother, and on the next Saturday there will be Bhagavad Gita at the same time at 4:45. So the Zoom link will be sent to you, but for every alternate Saturday, the Zoom link that I have sent you today for the Gospel of Holy Mother class, it will remain the same every alternate week. Not every Saturday, but every alternate Saturday. So we were discussing the conversation dated 7th July 1912, which took place at Udbodhan. Udbodhan, which is also known as Mayarbadi. So the disciple is asking a question. Mother, was it not arranged that you would visit Puri at the time of the car festival, Rath Yatra? So the disciple, Ras Bihari Maharaj or Swami Arupananda, is asking this question that you were supposed to, it was arranged that you would be visiting Puri during Rath Yatra, but why did you not go? So mother says, is it good to go there when there is such a rush of people? Perhaps there will be an epidemic of cholera then. Lakshmikanta, the priest, said, all the rooms and houses have already been rented. There is no place now to stay in. Even the small rooms have been rented for 10 rupees each. Please come during winter. So this is what the priest Lakshmikanta, perhaps he was a known priest who was to organize the darshan and other things, because there's such a big crowd during Rath Yatra that you need somebody, some priests who are known to you, to guide you and take you to the temple during special pujas and other things. So naturally, Lakshmikanta was a pujari who used to look after Holy Mother and her company, whoever went with her. So he advised her not to come because there was no room. Not only that, there would be a huge crowd during Rath Yatra. So she agreed, and then she decided to go there in winter. Then the disciple asks a question. These are all some very mysterious things which Holy Mother is answering. The questions are also quite strange, and the answers Holy Mother gives are certain things which only a person who has this sixth sense or who has a deep spiritual conviction, or incarnations or great saints who can understand these mystic spiritual truths, only they can answer in this way, because these are all very strange, not strange, these are all very important questions, and there is no way that a rational human being will come to these conclusions. These have to be understood from another plane of mind, or another from the spiritual plane. So whose image is worshipped there? Now everybody knows it's a temple of Jagannath. So Jagannath is a uh, aspect of Vishnu. But you see what mother says. Mother says, in a dream, I saw that it was really the image of Shiva. So the disciple was a bit surprised, and he starts asking, did you not see the image of Jagannath there? So when we go to the temple, when we try to see the deity which is there in the temple, in the shrine, in the Mandir, in the Garbha Griha, when we see, we have a different kind of darshan. But when these people, these great spiritual giants or prophets, when they see, like Brahmananda, he saw something else. So they have their own way, mystic visions. So mother says, no, I only saw the image of Shiva there. The Lord Jagannath Shiva. Of course, the word Jagannath means the father of the Lord of the whole world. So she says, I saw only the image of Shiva. The Lord Jagannath Shiva was seated on an altar made of a lakh of salagrams, an emblem of Vishnu. So an altar was made. It's a strange revelation which Holy Mother is making now. She saw Lord Jagannath as Shiva sitting on salagram. Normally, she would have seen a Shivalinga. People would expect that if Shiva is there, there would be a Shivalinga. But he is sitting on a altar which was made of lakh 100,000 emblems of Vishnu, Salagrama Shilas. Is it without any reason that thousands of devotees visit the temple? So she says, I saw this vision. When I visited Jagannath, I saw only the image of Shiva there. And thousands of people visit it. So this was a mystical vision which Holy Mother had. There's no way we can rationally try to understand this. We have to accept Holy Mother's word and the mystic vision she had. So she says there is also the image of goddess Vimala. A special offering is made to her on Mahastami night. Of course, that is a common practice in Jagannath temple. Vimla Devi is another form of Durga. So is it not natural that Shiva too will be present there? So this is Holy Mother's answer. Holy Mother is telling the disciple that when I went, I saw only the image of Shiva. Not though he was sitting on Salagrama, that Salagrama is normally the image of the seat, the emblem of Vishnu. You normally worship Shiva in a Salagrama and you worship Shiva in a Shivalinga. But she saw Vishnu, Lord Jagannath, as Shiva sitting on a Salagrama made of 100,000 Salagramas, emblems of Vishnu's. And that is why she says, and she also saw Shakti. She saw Vimala Devi, which is another name for Durga, another form of Durga. Durga appears in various forms. Mother, the Divine Mother, has also so many forms. So it is very difficult to understand what is the significance of this. But this is what Holy Mother saw. And then the disciple asks, some are of the opinion that this was originally a Buddhist temple and the image of Buddha was installed there. When the temple fell into the hands of the followers of Shankaracharya, the image was converted into emblem of Shiva. And still later, when the Vaishnavas got control, they converted it into the image of Sri Jagannath or Vishnu. Now, this is very common in Indian temples. India, idol worship, as I told you, came only after Buddhism. Some people are very much surprised to know this fact that we did not have temple as a place. Vedic rituals were the only rituals that were performed, and they were performed individually or in groups in community yajnas or homas, Vedic yajnas. In individual houses, everybody had a Vedic altar, a fire, and they used to worship inside the house. There was no concept of congregational common worship. So there were no temples and no images. Image worship was introduced. This is what Swami Vivekananda said in his lecture on Buddhism. He says image worship was introduced because the oldest images found in some of the places of worship are those of Buddha. But later on, after the religion of Buddhism started waning in India, then many of the kings who were either Shaktas, followers of Shivas, followers of Shakti Devi, or Vaishnavas, followers of Vishnu. So there were so many Puranic sects. This was in the post-Vedic age, not in the Vedic age. So the post-Vedic age, the huge temples or the huge structures that were created by Buddhists where they worship Buddha, the first images, the oldest images we find are those introduced by Buddhism. Though some preliminary worship of Shivalinga and other things would have been there, but these are all Puranic gods. The worship of the God as Vishnu, as Shiva, as the Trinity of Vishnu, Shiva, and Shakti, various forms of Shakti. So we'll find there are so many temples. They were an answer to the Buddhist temples. So a lot of Hindu temples were a Puranic after during the Puranic age, all this Vishnu Purana, Shiva Purana, and so many Puranas were written, and as a result, people started worshipping God through these images. So there was, depending on the king who ruled in that region, if he was a Shaivite, he would create a Shiva temple. Maybe that was a Buddhist temple. So the image was removed and they put a Shiva image. If a Vaishnava king came, he converted that same temple and introduced the worship of Shiva. So also Shakta. So Brahmananji also, when he went visited Jagannath, he had a different vision. So it is possible he had a vision of Shakti there. He had a vision of Mother, Divine Mother being worshipped. So Holy Mother says, you see, the Mother was also worshipped in this temple. Maybe it was originally worshipped, as historians say, a Buddha was being worshipped, because there is some proof which shows that Lord Buddha was worshipped by the Buddhists. But later on, Hindus started worshipping Shiva or maybe Shakti, and finally, it is now being worshipped as the temple is now being considered to be that of Jagannath, who is Vishnu, not who is Shiva. So this is what. Uh, so this is just a minute. Just give me 1 minute. So this is what Holy Mother says, that it is natural for different sadhakas to have different visions of different deities who are being worshipped in these temples. Perhaps that is the best explanation we can give. If Holy Mother saw, uh, if Holy Mother saw the image of Shiva, because at some period of time Shiva was being worshipped there. So Jagannath was worshipped as Shiva. Jagannath was also, when the Vaishnavas got control, the disciple says, Ras Bihari Maharaj believes that when the Vaishnavas got control of the Jagannath temple in Puri, they converted into a Vishnu temple. And of course, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started worshipping, then it was converted into, and it is now more popularly known as the temple of Vishnu. But the vision of Brahmananji, where he saw Divine Mother as the deity, and the vision of Holy Mother, where she saw the image of Shiva, these also are equally true, because at some period in history, the different gods, the different deities were worshipped there, and depending on the vibrations which these mystic people are able, saints like Swami Brahmananda and incarnations and the Divine Mother herself, she must have seen something, some spiritual vibrations of Lord Jagannath Shiva who is sitting there. But the explanation is given, the historical explanation of why, how this temple, the original temple of Jagannath, which was originally a Buddhist temple, is given by Ras Bihari Maharaj. He is trying to explain it to Holy Mother, saying that it was originally a Buddhist temple and Buddha was installed there. When the temple fell into the hands, the followers of Shankaracharya, the image was converted into the emblem of Shiva, because you all know Shankaracharya was a worshipper. Their family were worship. They were Shaivites. They worshipped Shiva, though he was an Advaitin. But he introduced. Many people will be surprised to know that though he was an Advaitin himself, It was Shankaracharya who started the tradition of worshipping God as in five different ways, five deities, Pancha Devata Puja. So to satisfy the followers of all different followers, different sects of Hinduism, he started worshipping. Before you do any worship, he said Pancha Devatas have to be worshipped. The five gods were the five different sects which were very popular in those days. You worship God as Vishnu, you worship God as Mother, the Divine Mother, Shakti, then Surya, because sun worship was also going on there. So Surya, Ganpati, worship all these five Pancha Devatas, Shiva, Vishnu, Shakti, Ganpati, and Surya. So these were the five gods. These are the five gods which Sri Shankaracharya introduced to solve the problem, because people were quarreling. Some were Vaishnavas, some were Shaivites. So the idea was, when he wanted to introduce this philosophy of Advaita, the formless God. So he said, the God without form is the ultimate reality. But if you at all you want to worship him with form, then have a very liberal attitude where you can choose to worship that same Sachidananda Brahma as any deity whom you like. That is the idea of Ishta, has come from that. Ishta means we try to worship a personal God who is either an avatara or a deity. But when we worship it, we don't think that it is a particular aspect. Maybe it is a particular form of God which we like. But ultimately, all of them represent Sachidananda Brahman. So that is the idea. So to introduce a sort of harmony in Hindu culture, Shankaracharya introduced this idea of Panchadevata puja, where before you may be worshipping any Ishta or God as Vishnu, God as Shiva, God as Shakti, or any other deity. But he said you have to do this Panchadevata puja in the beginning. That means you develop a liberal attitude, whether you are a follower of Ganapati, whether you are a follower of Smartas, whether you are a follower of Surya, Shiva, Vishnu. You have to worship all of them in the beginning, and then you worship your Ishta. So that is what Panchadevata puja means. So, so Holy Mother also confirms, says that, is it not natural that Shiva will also be present there? Because Vimala Devi is also worshipped, an aspect or a form of Durga is worshipped in the Jagannath temple. So naturally it follows that Shiva also would have been worshipped here in the past. But when the disciple gives the opinion according to history, whatever little history he had studied, Ras Bihari Maharaj or Swami Arupananda, that originally it was a Buddhist temple, it fell into the hands of the followers of Shankaracharya, not Shankaracharya himself, followers of Shankaracharya, who converted it into a Shiva temple, and then later on when Vaishnavas got control, they converted into Sri Jagannath, who is a incarnation of Vishnu, and or maybe a form of Vishnu, and it is continuing from that day. The Lord Jagannath is worshipped as Vishnu now. Mother says, Mother replies, he says, I don't know all this. She did not want to comment upon the historical aspects. She only said, what I saw, I'm telling you, I saw the image of Shiva in the Jagannath temple. So the mother concludes by saying that, because these people did not talk uh, like all other people do, using their reason or using their learning, so using their mind or using their intellect. They saw these visions, and whatever they saw, based on their experience, they spoke. Like Holy Mother's Gospel, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. There are many things where they speak in a very intuitive way. You cannot say that logically, whether how to understand this logically, because it is a fact of experience, spiritual experience. So if Brahmananji once, when he went to Tirupati, of course when he went to Tirupati, it seems he saw Divine Mother, not Jagannath. His vision, I'm sorry, it was in Tirupati when he was taken there. Tirupati is also an Vishnu is supposed to be worshipped there now. But strangely, when Swami Brahmananji was taken there, and when he saw the Garbha Mandira, he saw it was Divine Mother standing there. And later on, some people said, yes, originally it was a Shakta temple. The Divine Mother was worshipped when the Shaktas were in control of the Tirupati. Later on, slowly, Vishnu was being worshipped in Tirupati. So also similarly, Jagannath, though now Vishnu is being worshipped, but Holy Mother saw an image of Shiva. That is what she says, and that is what she tells the disciple, and it has been recorded. So there's no way we can rationalize it, because at different periods of history, these temples were worshipped by different sadhakas, and these vibrations are still there. That is why Swamiji used to say that these tirthas, these wonderful places, are places where for centuries and centuries different types of devotees and prophets and avatars and saints and ordinary sadhakas, devotees, they have gone there and worshipped God with some kind of faith. So all those vibrations, they don't die. The stones, the especially when the idol which is being worshipped, the stone idol or the wooden idol, whichever, or sometimes it is dhatu. So wherever these images are worshipped, when they do the pran pratishtha, the vibrations of that deity are superimposed on the deity, and the whole place becomes a tirtha. So the more good people and great devotees and incarnations of God like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so they have put a lot of spirituality, spiritual vibrations there because of their stay there. So also Dwaraka, so many great saints visited the wonderful temple of Sri Krishna in Dwaraka. So also Govindji. So Holy Mother must have seen this image of Shiva, because there was an Shiva would have been worshipped at some point of time in the history, because it's a very old temple. And originally, as Arupanji says, it was a Buddhist temple. But Mother says, I don't know about the history. She's just expressed what she saw, So that is based on the vision uh, the mystics have. So we cannot deny, because it's a matter of experience. Now the disciple replies, when mother says, I do not know all this, but I saw the image of Shiva. The disciple says, how many temples, how many images of gods and goddesses the Muslims have destroyed? They have cut off the noses of some of the images and the ears of others. So he is speaking of the historical facts where a lot of Hindu temples, idols were desecrated. It's not that the Muslims only did, there were so many rulers and uh, people who destroyed most of the images, because if the deity did not belong to their faith, then they would not not allow people to worship. So that was a very sad chapter in the history of all nations. There have been so much of quarrel. That's why people like Shankaracharya, whenever they come, they introduce this Pancha Devata Puja, so that the idea of worshipping God in different forms and accepting all the forms as true, as different representations of the same God. This idea was deeply ingrained in the Indian culture. But when foreign invasions took place, unfortunately, that exclusive feeling, that exclusiveness was introduced. And then people started quarreling uh, between my God and your God, my deity and your deity, even among the Hindus. It's not just that when the foreign rulers came and ruled India. But the disciple says so many gods and goddesses were there. India was full of temples after post Buddhist. After the Buddhists built so many temples, then Hindus also, different kings established so many temples. There are hundreds and thousands of temples where different deities, different aspects of God were worshipped. Some of them are major temples like the Jagannath temple in Puri, the Dwarka temple, and all those things, Somnath and all, where for centuries, though the idols were destroyed, again and again they were rebuilt and some deity was installed. So the vibrations, they don't die. And the deities who are worshipped during different periods in history, the vibrations still remain and people can have the vision of their particular deity. So also Sri Ramakrishna, he used to see different visions. People would be seeing something in the image, because our vision is gross. We just see through our senses. But real spiritual vision is not gross. It is something very subtle. It is a mystic vision. It's a matter of intuitive experience which these saints have. So that is why Mother says, I do not know all this, but I saw the image of Shiva. She's just expressing what she saw. Now the disciples says this, they have cut the noses. Then Mother also mentions one historical fact which she had heard, because she had been to Brindavan also. She says the image of Govindji of Brindavan was taken to Jaipur in fear of these Muslim invaders. When he referred to the Musalman invaders who came and desecrated many of the images. So when they came, they ruled a major portion of North India. Brindavan was also under siege. So they felt that the image of Govindji, because most of the priests who believe in idol worship, they believe that the whole, once the pran pratishtha is done, they believe that the image is a live one. They treat God, and it is true also that they treat God as a living force. So they took that image from Govindji. Holy Mother is saying the image of Sri Govindji of Vrindavan was taken to Jaipur in fear of these Muslim invaders. The priests became upset and insisted that the deity be brought back, because out of fear that the image would be destroyed, the image was taken by some section of the priests and taken it to some safety in Vrindavan, in Jaipur. Jaipur, there is a Govindji temple where this story is there, that that the Govindji, that the image of Govindji from of Vrindavan has been brought here. So they worship that Govindji there. So there is a famous Govindji temple in Jaipur. So, but the priests of Vrindavan, when the threat was reduced, when they felt that our image is gone and now they have been started worshipping it in Jaipur. So they wanted the Jaipur statue to be brought back and worshipped in Vrindavan. Then, when the priest got upset, so this is what Holy Mother is saying. She has heard this, and definitely there is a lot of truth in that. So she says, at last they heard a divine oracle. A divine voice came and said, the image has gone, not I. I am still living in spirit. So this shows how much universal our ideas are. It is not the image that is important, it is the spirit behind the image, the spirit with which you worship the Divine Mother. When Sri Ramakrishna worshipped Bhavatarini Ma Kali, he did not see her as an image. That's why when these Brahmos said, why do you worship a metal image or a stone image? Is there is there the presence of God in that? So Sri Ramakrishna used to say, I see the living mother, I don't see the image. She may be Mrunmayi, she may be made of a stone for you, but for me she is Chinmayi. I can see the consciousness behind the image. So that is how Indians worship. That's why, so in spite of being destroyed so many times, the temple of Somnath, here Mother is referring to the Govindji temple of Vrindavan, where Govindji was taken to Jaipur in fear of these Muslim invaders. But uh, Holy Mother refers to another incident. The divine Mother says the divine voice or the divine oracle said, the image has gone, I have not gone. So prepare another image and I shall stay in that image. So the God himself, the divine spirit, had to manifest himself in the form of voice, a divine voice, and tell the priest, don't bother about bringing that image, create another image. I'll not go anywhere. Let hundreds of images be destroyed. The same similar experience Swami Vivekananda had when he went to when he went to Kashmir, and he saw the wonderful temple where the image of Mother was destroyed. So a thought came to Swami Vivekananda when he was just trying to read the pages of history in his mind. He said, if I were alive, I would not have let this happen. How could these invaders come and destroy the image of Mother? The moment he thought, a divine voice, Mother told the Divine Mother, as it were, spoke to Swami Vivekananda and said, "Who is protecting whom? Is it you who protect me, or I who protect you?" So it is me who is protecting you. So you don't bother about whether the images are there or destroyed. You don't have to bother, because that ego, or that slight ego, had come in Swami Vivekananda, as he himself expressed it. He heard that voice very clearly. He said, "I would have created a 7-story temple of gold for you." So that was the feeling he had, the feeling of misery he felt, that how could they destroy such a beautiful place, uh, where mother uh, where mother was being worshipped in an image. So the Holy Mother, or the Divine Mother, spoke to Swami Vivekananda and said, uh, "I would not have you out of ego or out of arrogance, you want to say that you would have prevented me from destruction, prevented this temple from being destroyed. Who is protecting whom? Do I not protect you? If I wish it to be destroyed, then it will be destroyed." So these things will be discussed by Holy Mother herself now. She says there is a temple of Somnath in Gujarat. Everybody knows how Muhammad Ghazni used to. She says Sultan Muhammad, but Muhammad of Ghazni, it is the same thing. He was a sultan. So uh, Muhammad Ghazni came and destroyed this Somnath temple 17 times, the original Somnath temple. Now, of course, the new temple has been built after independence. A very big temple has been built on the same spot, as they say. But earlier also, Ahilyabai Holkar, when she was the queen of queen of Holkar, so Ahilyabai built another small Shiva temple for Somnath Shiva. So many times the image was destroyed. So Holy Mother is referring to this incident. So she says there is a temple of Somnath in Gujarat. The priests in former time used to bathe the deity daily with water from Gangotri. There is a saying even today that every day people would set out from Gangotri carrying the divine water, the pure water of Ganga from the source, and on their head, and walk all the way Somnath, Gangotri and Somnath. There are so many, several thousand miles apart. But the people used to come down and walk all the way with the pot on their heads, and then give it. So every day, somebody or the other who would have started a few months ago would reach Somnath, and every day they used to bathe. That is what people say. The deity, the Shivalinga or the deity there, was washed daily with water from Gangotri. So much of faith people had. So there were batches of people who used to come every day. They would reach Somnath and uh, bathe the deity with the water from Gangotri. Every day people used to carry water from the Himalayas in pots on their heads. However, Sultan Muhammad, that is Muhammad Ghazni, demolished the image and carried away the temple doors that were made of sandalwood. Why should that happen? Now the disciple, this is, of course, this is not what mother is saying, sorry, this is what the disciple is asking. And there is a temple of Somnath and all these things have happened. But Holy Mother referred to Govindji of Vrindavan being the taken to Jaipur because of the fear of that it would be desecrated. So Mother says the wicked do not feel the divine presence in the image. I mean, the wicked people who destroy, do all these types of destruction, they don't feel the divine presence in the image. The deity disappears, as it were, before them. He can do whatever he likes by his mere will. This also is a sport of God. So, this is a very, very important thing to understand, that the divine presence in the image depends on the worshipper. There is an intrinsic divinity there. But if a person is very gross, if a person is wicked, if he is so gross, then he cannot have that faith and he will not benefit by going to these temples. The image may be there, the sanctity may be there, the wonderful vibrations may be there, but the gross person who is wicked, they do not feel the divine presence in the image. The image, for them, it is just a stone. So they can desecrate it, and that also happens by the will of the Lord. This is also a sport of God. So the deity disappears, as it were. The deity disappears means not the physical deity, the intrinsic spiritual vibrations which are there, they cease to have any relevance to the people who do not have faith. So it is our faith, it is our sadhana or our faith which makes the tirtha living. That is what Swamiji also said, that the faith of thousands and thousands of people who visit, they create that vibrations. But to access those spiritual vibrations, to see these mystic visions, one has to evolve oneself spiritually. Otherwise, even if one calls oneself a devotee, he will simply go and see the image there. He will see the decoration. Once Swami Vijnananandaji had a disciple, one of his disciples, who passed away a few 10, 15 years ago. He himself told me that once he had been to Allahabad, Prayagraj, and Vijnanji was in his shrine. Yeah, Vijnananji was in Allahabad at that time, and in the shrine there was a beautiful image of Thakur, not image, a photograph of Thakur, and a lot of dust had accumulated on that. So naturally, when we see Sri Ramakrishna or the images, different images, we see in a very gross way through our gross eyes. But when Vijnananandji went there, his vision was totally different. As he himself mentioned in his reminiscences, Vijnananandji Maharaj used to see Thakur in different forms, as different deities sometimes, different spiritual states. He used to see the living presence of Sri Ramakrishna in the photograph. So this was not known to this disciple, who was a Swami of our order, a very senior monk. He said, I was just a brahmachari. I wanted to do some seva of my guru. So I went to Prayagraj and I went in the shrine. I saw the photo is full of dust. Then he thought perhaps Maharaj did not get time to clean this. He did not realize that these gross things, photo, they were just a suggestion which would make them have the vision of Sri Ramakrishna almost daily whenever they wanted. They did not depend on these photographs or the beauty of the photographs or the cleanliness of the photograph. For us, these gross things are important. For us, the breaking of the image is important. But as Mother says, the deity disappears before the people who worship the deity or the picture without any faith. And that is true for us also. Most of us, if we consider God to be gross, if we don't consider try to see the Satchidananda Brahman, the spirit of the deity behind that image, if you don't focus on that, if you don't meditate on that, then the deity is just a piece of paper put in a frame. That is what Swamiji also said. It is the devotee or it is the sadhaka or the siddha sadhaka who brings about a transformation in the tirtha. When so many sadhakas go there and worship the Lord Jagannath, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and so many saints before and after him, when they go and leave some vibrations which are there in the cosmos, which do not vanish. But in presence of ordinary people, you may say, why are they not influenced? Because the deity disappears, according to Mother, the spirit of the deity disappears as it were before them. So he can do whatever he like, whether the building remains, how long it remains, it is all his will. Now the topic will uh, change to, the disciple will now ask, if it is all Lord's will, then what is the use of all this karma? If it is everything is going to happen by the Lord's will, if these temples will be destroyed by the Lord's will, then what is the role? What are we supposed to do? Then the topic changes. Till now they were discussing about the mystic visions, the presence of the deity, and Holy Mother answered it in such a wonderful way, saying that it is the spirit that with which the image or the temple is being considered by the sadhaka that is important, and that gives sanctity to those tirthas. And if a large number of evil people visit that tirtha, then the sanctity also decreases and the capacity. That's why the tirthas are places where one goes to charge one's spiritual vibrations, because there are a lot of vibrations still alive. A lot of people, great prophets, they have left behind those vibrations. Maybe the vibrations are different. Some people have worshipped him as Shiva, some have worshipped him as Divine Mother, some have worshipped him in Vishnu, but the area, the place, the temple is the same. So that, at least for people who are sensitive, they go with some kind of faith, they see the divinity in that form, the form in which uh, the different saints and the prophets have worshipped in those places, the different avatars have worshipped. So that is the significance of the Tirtha. But as at the same time, Holy Mother makes it very clear that if the wicked people go there, they don't see the same divine presence, they don't get so much benefit, or they may not get any benefit as much as the devotees or sadhakas do. If sadhakas go with a wonderful spiritual nature, with a high spiritual sensitivity, then they shall be seeing the real image of the deity, or they will get a transcendental or maybe an intuitive experience of their deity in that image. But by itself, the image is not important. So he can do whatever he likes by his will. So then the disciple asks, it is also, if it is a sport of God, if everything happens by the divine will, then the disciple says, can karma, the effect of karma, be made null and void? If that is the case, then we are the victims of our own karma. If we are victims of our own karma, then how can the grace of God, or by worshipping God, can it be reduced or can it be made null and void? The scriptures say that knowledge alone can destroy karma. The knowledge of Satchidananda Brahman, once it is there, according to Advaita philosophy also, no amount of karma will destroy karma. It is only the knowledge which is the result of karma will destroy. Still, one must reap the result of prarabdha karma. So the disciple is asking, he says, one must reap the result of prarabdha karma. So then, how can the karma be destroyed? If one has to reap the results, then what is the use of our praying, going to temples, and doing all those things? The mother then gives a wonderful answers about how karma acts on different jivas and what it does, and how can we reduce its effect. What are the different ways? Mother says, karma alone is responsible for our misery and happiness. Even the master had to suffer the effect of karma. Now, here you have to be very careful that, because in the Gita, we know the Lord Sri Krishna says that the the incarnation is not subject to karma, because he is the ruler of karma. So the effects of karma which we see in the Lord, which we see in Krishna, which we see in the different incarnations, the various sufferings they have to undergo in their physical body, in their mind, and all the things. Even Rama had to suffer so much. He even wept when his Sita was taken away, and he became so depressed that he had to go in search of her. He was just like a human being. All the human aspects of these incarnations, these show that they take upon willingly, they are not forced to, they're forced by the prarabdha karma, but they don't have a thing known as prarabdha karma, but they take upon themselves because they don't want to break the law of karma which they have created, with which the Ishvara is ruling the universe. The same law is, he is subject to the same law as long as he has the body. That is the idea. So mother says even the master Sri Ram Krishna had to suffer from the effect of karma. So she is trying to say that don't think you are the only one, or the jivas are the only one who have to suffer. As when you take the human body, you have to follow this law of karma, and willingly or unwillingly, most probably in the case of incarnations and the saints, these karma is suffered willingly, whereas we have to suffer it whether we want it or not. Swami Vivekananda very clearly says in his Karma Yoga that a great sacrifice, in one of his letters he writes, a great sacrifice is going on. So you have to suffer. Everybody has to do some kind of sacrifice. He has a role to play because of his karma, and he has to sacrifice. He has to do work. If you are willing, then you will save a lot of trouble. But if you are unwilling, then nature will force you. Nature will force the law of karma on upon us. And when nature forces the law of karma upon us, it becomes very painful. But if we willingly accept the prarabdha karma and think it is prarabdha karma, then we can not only reduce the effect but bear the fruits very easily. We don't get troubled by that. So here, Siram Swami, Holy Mother is saying that even master had to suffer the effect of karma. Once his elder brother, she is giving quoting, she is narrating an incident which happened, and it is a very significant. This is a very significant incident which happened in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, which helps us to understand that how careful we should be when we do any karma, because we have to reap the benefits. Just to show that we have to suffer the effect of karma, it says even God cannot escape, though he can lessen its influence or he can lessen its effects, but he has to uh, satisfy the law of karma. He has to be subject to the same law of karma as jivas have. So he says once Sri Ramakrishna's elder brother was drinking water while delirious. He was delirious. See, there are certain diseases where the doctors, the Ayurvedic doctors, tell you not to drink water. There are certain diseases like typhoid, or I think some fever. When you are having a very high fever, they give you the medicine and tell the people who are looking after the patients not to take water, try to avoid water as much as possible. So, for whatever reason. So, Sri Ram Krishna's elder brother was drinking water while he was delirious. He desperately wanted to drink water, but the doctor had told very clearly that don't allow him to drink water. So the master snatched the glass out of his hand after he had drunk just a little. So he was trying to serve his elder brother, knowing fully well that it might harm him because the doctor had prohibited. The brother became angry. His brother was supposed to be a man of truth. He had done a lot of sadhana. He was also a great sadhaka. So here you see how the law of karma worked in the case of Sri Ramakrishna. The brother became extremely angry and said, "You have stopped me from drinking water." He wanted to drink that water, and not knowing the reason why Sri Ramakrishna has snatched away the water from him, he says, "You will also suffer likewise in your life. You will also feel such pain in your throat." Perhaps he was having some pain in the throat. It said, "You will also feel pain in your throat." The master then humbly said, "Brother, I did not mean to injure you. You are ill. Water will harm you. That is why I have taken the glass away. Why have you then cursed me in this manner?" He knew his brother was a righteous person. So Sri Ramakrishna was afraid. Afraid in the sense he was a little worried that the consequences will come. Of course, he very willingly took upon himself the prarabdha karma, but he knew this will happen. Then the brother said, weeping, because he loved Sri Ramakrishna. Though Ramkumar had mm, Ramkumar had great love for Sri Ramakrishna, but at the same time the curse escaped his lips. So he says, the brother, he also wept, knowing that he has committed a mistake. "I don't know, brother, these words just came out from my mouth. They cannot but bear fruit. I am afraid that they will bear fruit. I said it unknowingly, but they simply came out. Maybe it is God's will." At the time of his illness, the master told Holy Mother, that I have got this ulcer in my throat because of that curse. Now you see, Sri Ramakrishna says that it is because of the karma he had to suffer. There should have been some excuse for him. Of course, he took the sins of some of his disciples like Girish Ghosh. That was one reason why he had the disease. But then the law of karma, the curse which the action which he did, he snatched away the water. Though it was unwilling, he had to suffer the consequences. But then None of you need suffer in the future. Now, Master says, Sri Ramakrishna says, don't worry, this curse has happened. I mean, because of the curse, I am suffering this throat, but that will be a great benefit for many people because I will be taking away all your sufferings. You need not, none of you need suffer in the future. Those who surrender to me, they do not have to surrender or to suffer in the future. Just as people believe, the Christians firmly believe that it is Jesus who was crucified, and because he took upon the sins of entire humanity, whoever follows him will not follow him in vain. That is what all the saints say, that we follow us and we worship Jesus who has taken upon himself the sins of humanity, so that humanity do not have to suffer the consequences of their actions. He has reduced the intensity of the consequences of the karma of different people. So Sri Krishna says, maybe this cancer, the ulcer in my throat, is a result of my karma, but that karma is going to be of great benefit for other people because none of you need suffer in the future. I have taken all your sufferings. Then mother says, I said to him in reply, how can an ordinary man possibly live if such a thing as this can happen to you? So Holy Mother at that time asked Sri Krishna, if you can't get rid of the results of your karma, then what will happen to the ordinary people? Will they be so helpless as helpless toys in the hands of karma? The master remarked, then master made a very significant remark, Sri Krishna. He said, my brother was a righteous man. His words must come true. Can the words of anyone and everyone be thus fulfilled? So that doubt which came into Holy Mother's mind, that if somebody curses, and because of some reason somebody curses, will that curse come true? He says no. Sri Krishna says no, it's not going to happen. It is only because my brother had done so much of sadhana, he was a righteous man, he never spoke untruth, he stuck to truth. Even his father was well known for that. Khudiram refused to speak any untruth, even if it meant losing his house, losing his property, and all those things. So they were righteous men. They were people who followed what they practiced truth literally till they've practiced truth, and that made every word they uttered come true. So there's people who bless you or even curse you. If they are righteous, then they come true. So Sri Krishna seems to be telling Holy Mother that you don't worry, every Tom, Dick and Harry, every person who curses you, the effect will not be there on you, the karma will not be there on you because they are not righteous people. So he says only righteous, because my brother was a righteous man, even though he said it by mistake, it had to come true. The result of karma is inevitable. Holy Mother now concludes by saying, uh, he says the result of karma is inevitable, but there is a condition. It is inevitable, but at the same time, by repeating the name of God, you can lessen its intensity. If you were destined to have a wound as wide as a plowshare, you will get a pinprick at least. So here are words of hope. Holy Mother says that the result of karma may be inevitable, but you have to always remember that for every problem there is a solution. There is a spiritual solution. So when you repeat japa, when you do the name of God, you can definitely reduce the intensity. Not that the suffering will go away, but if a very big wound was supposed to come, maybe Sri Krishna also would have had to suffer a lot because he had taken the karma or taken the bad karma sins of so many of his disciples. But still, in spite of the ulcer or the cancer of the throat, he lived for a few months and distributed spirituality to all in his wonderful life. So that's why the effect of karma can be counteracted to a great extent by japa and austerities. This was the case with King Suratha. Now, Suratha is a character in Chandi. The King Suratha and Samadhi, the businessman or the merchant, they also were cursed because King Suratha had worshipped goddess by slaughtering 1 lakh goats. You see, in those days there was this animal slaughter, and people used to offer innocent animals. That was the Vedic ritual, which was slowly had degraded. We do not know if animal sacrifice was there in the beginning. That is why Buddhism had to come, and Buddha had to prohibit this slaughter of animals, merciless slaughter of animals. But it became such a fad that lakhs and lakhs of goats were slaughtered to the Divine Mother. So King Suratha, he had done this. And because he had killed so many goats, definitely the effect of that karma would have come to him. But but he says later on, these 100,000 goats all came together and killed the king with one stroke of the sword. That is, in his later life, the combined effect of all the sins of all the 1,000 goats came came upon him, and he had to die, no doubt, because of. But the fact is that logically speaking, according to karma theory, he did not have to be born 100,000 times. Mother says, normally, if you have killed so many, then you have to be born 1,000 times, and every time you get killed. This was because he worshipped the Divine Mother. He, along with all the sins which he committed, he had worshipped the Mother, the Divine Mother, and ignorantly he had done all these things, but still he had to die once at least, not 100,000 times. 100,000 times he did not have to die. Chanting God's holy name lessens the intensity of the karmic effects. The effects of karma can be reduced this way. So, here Holy Mother seems to say that though it is inevitable that the karma phala, especially the prarabdha karma, as you know, there are 3 types of karma: prarabdha, sanchita, and agama. Sanchita karma is the karma which has been accumulated. So you can reduce the effect, or you can destroy the effects of the sanchita karma which is there in your chitta, in our samskaras, directly by japa. They do not even fructify. But there are certain karmas which are already started fructifying. They are known as prarabdha. They have started having their effect. So we have these different diseases, different problems, and different issues in our life. They come as a result of prarabdha karma, not sanchita karma. Sanchita karma are still there, and before it is laid, before it becomes converted to prarabdha karma, we have the option to destroy it at the root by our sadhana. That is the entire idea behind this mantra yoga and japa sadhana. By continuous japa, we can destroy the sanchita karma, but the effects of prarabdha karma you have to bear, but you can lessen its. That is what Mother says, that karma is supreme in the world. The prarabdha karma you have to face, not the sanchita karma or agama karma. They are not yet ready. Prarabdha means they have become ripe. They are just about to show their effect in our lives. But before they show their effect, if we do japa and try to reduce its intensity, that is what we can do at the most. Whereas the sanchita karma and the other karma can be totally destroyed by japa. So that's why Mother says, disciple asks, if that be so, then the law of karma is supreme in this world. Then why should one believe in God? The Buddhists accept the law of karma but do not accept God. Buddha also, in a way, to encourage good deeds, he said, what will worship of God alone do? He did not say don't worship God, but he said what will that alone achieve? You have to do good deeds to counter the effects of the bad deeds. So that's why the Buddha gave more emphasis on karma than prayer, because he believed that we have to work out our karma in a very slow way. By doing, if we accept the law of karma, then people will be afraid to do bad deeds. So that was his idea. So Mother says, do you mean to say that there are no deities like Kali, Krishna, Durga and the like? So Mother says, yes, Buddhists may not believe in God. They may not believe in these deities. But the deities like Kali, Krishna, Durga, they are also equally real. They are not just mental constructs. They are absolutely real in the sense from the subtle point of view. They are also very powerful entities. By repeating whose mantra, by repeating the bija, repeating the mantra, we get the effect. So the disciple then says, is the effect of karma destroyed by the austerities and japa we do of these deities, these different deities like Kali, Krishna, Durga? So can we destroy? Then mother says, why not? It is good to do the right kind of work. But at the same time, she says, apart from the japa, you have to go on doing the right kind of work along with this. Just because with japa you can destroy, that doesn't mean God gives you the license to do whatever you like. You go on doing evil and then you do try to remove its effect by japa. That is not the right way. He says, but you have to do the right kind of work also. But the karma can be destroyed by austerities and japa. She says you have to do the right kind of work because one feels happy in this life in doing good and one suffers by doing evil. In this life itself, we will find that by doing good work, it not only cancels the effect of the karma, but it makes us happy. But if we do evil, though we may gain materially, it always creates a kind of sorrow, it creates a kind of suffering. So that is what uh, Holy Mother says. And this conversation concludes here. Then next morning, there is the same conversation. There's a different topic which is being discussed in Udbodhan, and the disciple asks some questions about how she learnt reading and what does she feel about Ramayana, when did you learn to read, and all those things. So the topic changes. So we will conclude today. I've taken more time, and if there are some questions, you can quickly ask. I am unmuting you. Yesterday, people found it a little difficult to unmute themselves. So I will unmute you, and if you want to ask in the chat, you can ask questions in the chat as well. There are some questions. Yes, I'll answer the questions in the chat. I'll not unmute you because there will be a lot of noise. Yesterday, somebody had forgotten. Yesterday, I don't know who, but somebody had forgotten to unmute their audio. So I was told that there was a lot of disturbance. So I don't want that. So I'm muting all of you now. And I will read the questions which you have asked in the chat, and I will try to answer them. Yes, there is a very big question. Although this Mahatma's greatness, the question is, the Mahatmas or the great souls, the greatness or divine compassion, Mahanta and compassion took worldly karmas. It appears this karma absorption seems unfair on Sri Ramakrishna and Jesus Christ, right? Like also when Bhagwan Krishna absorbing the negativity from Rakshasi mother Putna. Oh, no, that is not justified. You see, it is a divine Leela. The concept of incarnation is very difficult to understand. You see, we feel, most of us feel that we think of justice and injustice from our gross point of view. But for the incarnations, for Jesus Christ, for Ramakrishna, the pain in the throat, they don't treat it as we treat it. If we were to fall sick, we had this suffering, it would be unbearable for us. But because they had separated themselves from the body at will, the effect of karma can be seen only on the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha. You see it in the gross. You always maybe see in the Manomaya Kosha also. But they were seeing this whole thing as a divine drama. So whether if there was joy or sorrow, for them it was the same. Whether it is Jesus, whether it is Sri Krishna, the suffering, everybody, every incarnations, when they take human form, they have to suffer. But unlike us, for us, we feel it is injustice. Why should this suffering come to us? Why should it not come to people who are doing evil actions? They will suffer their prarabdha, but Somehow, some good Sanchita karma is there which has become prarabdha and they are enjoying the effects. But if they continue to do bad things now, a day will come when they have to undergo the effects of that bad karma. So, ordinary people, they are subject to the joys and sufferings of karma on their bodies or on their minds. Whereas in the case of incarnations, they show you the effect one has through their actions. For example, they say in the previous incarnation as Rama, because Rama had killed Vali for the sake of Sugriva, he had to be killed. Vali came, was born as that hunter who was responsible for putting an end to Sri Krishna's life, the earthly existence. When he hit the the toe of Sri Krishna, he bled and then he passed away quietly in Prabhas near Somnath. He was hit by at Dehot Sarga, at another place where he was hit by the arrow. So they say it was Vali whom Sri Rama had killed as in his Rama incarnation. That's how the Puranas explain it. That it was the arrow of Rama that killed uh, Vali, and because of that, he became the cause of Sri Krishna giving up the body, and he came as a hunter, and not willingly but unwillingly. He just thought it was a deer, and he hit the arrow, and Sri Krishna had to give up the body. So this karma effect is seen on incarnations also, but they don't suffer. Jesus Christ did not suffer, nor did Sri Ramakrishna suffer in the way we suffer from the effects of the gross karma, on the gross body, because they have separated themselves. And for them, it is just a divine leela. They have the capacity to withdraw their mind and the prana, or mind from the body and prana, whenever they suffer physically. So we don't have to feel sorry for them, because Jesus Christ himself forgave the person or forgave the people who killed him. He says, "Oh Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." Which person will do that? Which human being? We will not do that. If somebody kills us, we do not forgive them. But they do, because they don't see the body as something important. The very idea of spirituality is to rise above the gross, not give so much. We have been hypnotized day and night. We are hypnotizing ourselves and giving so much importance to the gross, because we are immersed in the gross, in worldly things. So unless we raise ourselves, unless we purify our minds, that means we remove our mind and turn it inward towards the subtle, turn it towards the buddhi, turn the buddhi towards the Lord Satchidananda, who is pure spirit. If we do that, then like these incarnations, we also will reach a stage where these things become insignificant. They are no longer sufferings for us. So you got my point. So don't think it was injustice or negativity or any kind of problem for them. We don't have to worry. We have to worry only about ourselves. Next is Ravi Lingam is asking, before idol worship, the concept of various deities existed. How were they worshipped then? Yes, in the Vedic age, the gods were worshipped as Agni, Vayu, the different natural forces were worshipped. So, before the idols came, they were worshipped as either natural forces or Indra, Varuna. There are Vedic deities also. The Puranic deities, Vishnu, Shiva, they are all modifications of the Vedic deities. Certain forces of nature, like Vayu. Vayu was worshipped as god Vayu, the god of wind. The god Surya was worshipped. Surya worship continued in the Puranas also. Sun was worshipped. Different mountains were worshipped as god. Snakes were worshipped. Every living being was worshipped as a deity in the Vedic age. So that is what I think I've satisfied you. So before idol worship, these were then. Then the idols were created after we got that idea from Buddhism, according to Swamiji. Buddhism first introduced the idea of congregational worship. Before that, it was all personal worship in their homes. We used to worship Agni in our homes, make a dhuni and worship that Agni, chant the Vedic mantras. So the first mantra of the Rig Veda starts with Agni Mile Purohitam. Agni is the priest and he is giving, I am offering the oblations and he will carry it to God. So all these things, wonderful yagnas, those slowly vanished, and we took on the rituals, the image worship of from the Buddhists, and the Puranic gods were created. So the deities kept on increasing. So also we believe in the idea of Ishta. We can take any incarnation, Rama, Krishna, we have so many incarnations. And also Buddha is an incarnation. So any incarnation who has manifested these qualities, who has realized the Satchidananda within themselves, or who are manifestations of Satchidananda, if we worship them, then it is like worshipping the same Agni through fire, you are worshipping through idols. There is not much difference. And the last question is, uh, okay. You mentioned about the animal sacrifices to the mother goddess. Where did this tradition come from, and is it condoned in the scriptures? You see, all our religious practices which we practice, whether it is animal sacrifice or fruit sacrifice, we offer fruits also to God. Fruit is also a living thing. We pluck it from the trees. We offer flowers. Flowers, Sri Ramakrishna did not like to pluck the flower sometimes when he was in a different mood. When he worshipped God in Virat, he said, how can I pluck these delicate flowers and offer it? They are so happy. We are plucking them, we are forcing them, we are killing a tree, almost destroying a tree by removing all these flowers and offering to God. We are also plucking the fruits which should fall after they become ripe. If they fall, but we don't wait, we just pluck it from the trees and offer it. So also this killing animal, because people used to eat in Vedic sacrifices, they used to eat goats. So naturally, the idea was, just as we offer flowers and accept that flowers, we offer fruits and eat those fruits. The idea of offering the goat, anyway, we are eating, slaughtering the goats for eating. So they said, why not offer it to the sacrifice in the sacrificial fire? Anyway, they used to sacrifice goats and other animals and then eat that as prasad. So this is a very old tradition, the goat sacrifice or any other sacrifice. It is, whether it is a sin, to many it may be a sin, but there is no scientific reason as such. It's just a human nature. Now it is just like asking, why are you a vegan? Why are you eating non-vegetarian food? That is also a sin. But if you worship it, then people object. Why should you worship the same thing, whether you worship it or not? Anyway, you eat goats, you eat all the beef, you eat so many things. People eat all the different animals. They even eat snakes. If you see in China, they eat almost everything, whatever is living except human beings. So when you this is not a tradition which has started at any time. People ate all these things for survival, just as animals ate other animals. Human beings also ate, but some people later on thought we are destroying animals. So they became vegans, they became vegetarians. So there is no scientific reason as such. It all depends. Human is a carnivorous animal. There are some birds and some animals which eat only vegetarian food. There are some animals which eat both or eat only animal food. So it all depends on the biological. It is not so important. But all they did was, when they when they were already eating the goats, they thought, let us make a sacrifice of that to our god and then take it as prasad. That's the simple explanation. Okay, so I take your leave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. So we will meet tomorrow at 4:30, not 4:45. Today I was a bit late. but tomorrow we will meet at 4:30 for the gospel class. But the link is different. I shall send you again, but I have sent you the last week's gospel link will work tomorrow also. But in case you don't have, I'll send it tomorrow.